In this video, I wanted to talk about some basic tips and tricks on how to make your life easier as a dungeon master. This will help speed up your games immensely, and I found all of these changes to be so good and so useful that I can't imagine running any game without them at this point. Uh, in in brief, the things or the topics I want to cover in this video are configuring player characters and granting them additional powers for different uses, dungeon master character sheets, creating creatures for things that players can interact with, and something I'm calling item piles. Although the more I think about it, the more I realize how powerful item piles can be and how much more useful they can be than just containing items. But we'll get to that when we discuss that topic. So the very first thing I want to talk about is additional powers on players. And I'm going to recommend definitely giving your player characters many more powers than just the ones that they're getting from their character class. These include the basic sort of generic actions their characters can take, such as aiding another, crawling, escaping, etc. This is great because I have very often times had players ask me, what kind of action is it to do this thing? I want to crawl. What do I need to do? Well, they can just click on crawl and see that, oh, it's a move action. Or I want to escape a grab. What do I need to do? Well, it's a move action. I want to delay my action. What do I do? And it gives them a quick reference for what these things are without them having to go into a journal entry to get access to it. And it also allows them to click that button and just as if it were any other action that they were taking, like a regular power. And it's a very useful tool. You could even use it to give them certain bonuses, for example, with total defense. So in here, if I click into total defense, you can see I have it set with an effect that gives them the proper +2 defense bonus that total defense should grant. So he can click it, he gets the effect, and it properly disappears at the start of their next turn. And you can also see it is in fact giving them this +2 defense bonus. Another thing that I've just learned about and have really fallen in love with is this second wind power, which can function just sort of like a regular encounter power, essentially, which is what it is. Second wind is an encounter power that everybody gets, where you spend one of your healing surges. So you can set it to spend a healing surge. You can set an action type for it. In this case, Norbin being a dwarf, his second wind is a minor action. And then you can even give it the effect of granting +2 bonus, a +2 bonus to all of your defenses, similarly to how total defense grants you a +2 bonus to all defenses. And furthermore, there's this macro that I was told about in chat where you could very easily set or grant the healing directly from a character's surge value to that character on click of this power, rather than going through your standard healing cycle, which would be clicking the healing roll required button, putting in some value here, and then setting regain surge amount. And then when they use it, they have to press 3 times in order to actually get the healing onto their character. And I hate that. Anything that takes more than 1, maybe 2 button clicks is too much, in my opinion. But with this macro, and by ignoring all of these sort of attack, damage, and healing roll buttons, all Norbin has to do, if he decides to spend his second wind, is just click the second wind button. And you can see he instantly healed for his surge amount. It instantly reduced his healing surges by 1. If he had no more healing surges, he wouldn't be able to click the button. It would just throw an error. And it used this power for this encounter. And healing surge, or second wind being an encounter power, that makes perfect sense. And so Not only that, but it's also granted the +2 bonus to all defenses that he should be gaining from using his second wind. So it's a one-click button that does all of those things, as opposed to the built-in second wind function, which is one click to open the window, one click to hit second wind, and then another click on total defenses to get the actual buff from total defenses for your +2 bonus to all defenses. So one click versus 3 clicks to do the exact same thing is, I think, a much better deal. Every click that you eliminate is going to speed up your game. If not immediately, then over time. If you're playing, like my sessions are typically 3 to 4 hours once a week. And if I have a combat going and I have 5 players, one of them is, and a 6th NPC who also has the ability to healing surge, or I'm sorry, second wind. The time spent clicking these buttons is going to add up over time. And previously, I might have Norbin here, who's played by typically my slower player. He'll click a button, and it takes a while for it to load for him. Then he hits the other button, and it takes a while to load for him. And then he's like, oh, wait, what do I have to do? I have to go to total defense. Oh, I closed my character sheet. Hold on. Let me open my character sheet, go to total defense, and then finally the process is done. And that process, me describing to you, is probably faster than it actually takes when we're running through the game in real life. So now I can just tell him, hit second wind. Just press that one button a single time and you're done. And that will be a much faster process, not only for me, but for him and also everybody else in the party. So remember, minimizing button clicks is always going to be useful. I highly recommend minimizing as many button clicks as possible for all your players. And this is a great way to do that. Also, another added benefit of having extra powers on a character sheet is you can have a power set to apply an effect that you wouldn't be able to automate through the original power. So for example, I have this power on Norbin called Apply Word of Exchange Protection Bonus. And I put a level next to it called Trigger, so I know that this ability is actually triggered by something else. And if we look at Word of Exchange in the rider for Rune of Protection, it says the target takes a penalty to all defenses, and the next ally to hit the target before the end of your next turn gains a power bonus to AC equal to whatever. And so this second ability here, the next ally to hit the target gains something, can't be automated because I can't create an effect that says the next person that hits me gains this thing. That's just far too complicated. What I can do, though, is have my player keep an eye for who that next player is, and then say, oh, you hit that guy? Like let's say in this scenario here, Norbin walks up, he walks over to this hyena, and he smacks him with Word of Exchange, right? And let's say he hits him. He actually hit him that time. That's great. And then he applies the Word of Exchange debuff to him. And then let's say next turn Rick goes. He's also targeting this hyena, and he decides to Tide of Iron this thing. Sure, he marks it, whatever. Right, he hits the hyena. Now, Norbin, being a keen-eyed player, can just look over at Rick and say, oh, you hit this guy first? All right, well, I'm gonna target you, and I'm gonna grant you the +4 AC bonus because you were the first guy to hit this creature. And we can see if I look at Rick's character sheet here, his AC is 28, so it's very high because he has this additional +4 AC bonus that he's gaining from the ability I just gave to him from Norbin. And this effect will apply as normal, or I'm sorry, it will expire as normal. And it's just a quick and easy way for Norbin to apply this very complicated effect, or this complicated trigger for an effect to someone who is triggering it and thus gaining that effect. So this is actually going to tie into what I want to discuss next, which is Dungeon Master character sheets. Because I feel like just from a sort of meta perspective, it makes sense to have a Dungeon Master character sheet. Because, I mean, all the players have character sheets. Why doesn't the Dungeon Master? Well, in a typical physical in-person game, you don't need a character sheet because you have all the other sort of physical supplies available to you, right? You have miniatures, you have your notepad available, you have dice, etc. And a lot of stuff is done either theater of the mind or just with basic math and player understanding of what the situation is. But in a game like this, where you really want to keep track of all these various effects and powers and abilities, and dice rolls are going to be based off of you interacting with the computer in some way, it makes sense to have a character sheet that allows you to sort of automate a lot of these processes and minimize the amount of clicking that you are doing through a bunch of various tabs. Because not only do I hate clicking multiple times to get one thing done, I also hate having to click into a new tab to get something started, which is why I use another module to like get combat started instantly, as opposed to going to the combat tab. I actually hate going to the combat tab. But here you can see I have a Dungeon Master character sheet. I have it tied to my user. So when I hit C and I don't have any tokens targeted, it opens up my character sheet. And immediately that's one button click that gets me a whole breadth of options without having to lose my view of what's going on. I don't have to turn my direction over here and click here and then click in here and then search for some particular item. I can stay on chat, and let's say they're in the middle of this big fight, and I say, I don't know, something happens that's on my character sheet. Let me take a look at that. You're getting attacked by a tentacle, right? And so this is immediately, it's a great way to access all this information because you can do it instantly, essentially. But not only can you put powers in here, you could put a lot of stuff on a character sheet. You could put information in your biography. So for example, I have information that I need at hand. I put here. All my regular journal entries can stay in my journal tab. I'll go there when I'm between sessions working on like building out the campaign or building my notes. But anything I need immediately, I link it into my biography and I can just click it and it opens right there. I don't have to go into another tab and then search for something. It's just right here at my fingertips. And the way the new journal system is set up, it's very easy to sort of get all these different pages going and to navigate through different sections of like a dungeon that you're building out. And so the combination of these two things is going to make your life as a DM a lot easier. And it's right there. It's all on your character sheet. Everything is sort of centralized. And sure, you are navigating tabs, but they're minimized tabs, right? It's a tab that has things that you need right away. You can think about it like I have a little bag that I carry around with me when I go outside. If I don't want to put stuff in my pockets, or like if I'm going to the airport, for example, I just put everything in one little bag that's very important to me, like my cell phone, my passport, my wallet, whatever. And so when I'm going through security, I just take off that one bag and I put it into the little box. And I'm not rifling through my pockets trying to find exactly everything that I'm looking for. It's all in one location, and it makes my experience going through security a lot faster. I think about this in a very similar way. It's one smaller or one fewer moving part is going to make your life a lot easier. And again, you can put any information in here that you like. You could put journal entries, you could put notes, you can remove powers you no longer need and put powers that you know you're going to need. You could put conditions in here because conditions through this conditions tab are kind of shitty to work with. This is not a great system. I'm constantly like, or at least previously when I still used this system before this effect system, I was always like, where's prone? There's prone. You're prone now. Like, and that sucks. But instead, you could put all of these different effects right here through powers on your character sheet. You can even put items. You can put feats that you know your characters are going to have. Like maybe you know your characters are going to level up soon. And whenever my characters are about to level up, I ask them to tell me ahead of time what they want so I can have it pre-configured for them when the game starts. So last session, they got to level 7 and their characters were already all set to go. I just threw the powers onto their character sheet, threw their feats onto their character sheets, and they were all ready. You could even put effects and stuff like that if you wish, but for the most part, the most important things are your biography here to contain a bunch of notes that you need at hand, your powers, which are going to be different effects and things that you want to target certain creatures that might not be, or certain players or tokens that might not be based off of any individual creature or originating from any original creature. An inventory, so you can quickly drop items onto players, especially common items that they're always buying, like potions and stuff like that, torches, whatever. And then feats if they are leveling up soon and you want to just quickly drop a feat onto them. So highly recommend the Dungeon Master sheet. Again, once you set it up as your own character, you just hit C so long as you're not selecting anything, and it opens that up right away and you can quickly access all this information. This is much faster than navigating through these various tabs. So the next thing I want to talk about is creating creatures for things that players can interact with. And the first thing we're going to talk about is zones. So Norbin here has the Rune of Undeniable Dawn, and when he casts the Rune of Undeniable Dawn, when it hits, it creates a zone. And I was trying to think of all these different ways that I can get this zone to work, because the zone has some effect when you're within its radius. And I finally came to this conclusion that the best way to do it would be to create just a creature that is essentially this zone. And so now, whenever he uses this Rune of Undeniable Dawn, I just create this token, and the token has all of the effects associated with it right from the start. If I go to effects, it has Rune of the Undeniable Dawn right there. This is going to be the actual aura that affects all of the different players. It has the radius set. It has a color associated with it, so they know exactly where the aura ends. And I can place it exactly where it's supposed to be. Yeah, I could even put like -5 or whatever to make the character appear above it. But we could see right away how powerful this is. Now I have this zone that is easily viewable by the players that has some cool effect or graphic associated with it and can be easily and instantly added to the battlefield. It has all of its attributes already set, and it's another one-stop shop for adding this functionality to the game. Now I know there's some like tricky modules you can use to create have like a macro that will create this creature on use on a certain location, depending on what. I'm not going to get too into that. I'm sure that would be great, but for now, I just go into. It happens so infrequently that I just go into the actors directory, or I even have it somewhere off screen. Like if I know it's going to happen at some point, I'll just put Rune of Undeniable Dawn somewhere over here, and then when he uses it, I just click and drag it onto the battlefield. Right? I think about it again as if we were playing an in-person game, that this could very well be a, I don't know, like some kind of template that I'm using in a physical in-person game, right? When I used to play D&D 3rd edition, we had templates for Fireball, and you would just put this clear template onto the battlefield and know exactly what creatures you're hitting with it. And so that's another great way to utilize this functionality, creating a creature as a thing that players can interact with. It just makes life a lot easier for utilizing zones, because you can have all that information preset and just click and drag it onto the battlefield. But not only can you make zones, you can also make a whole wide range of things. Like creatures are actually very, very powerful or tokens, I should say, are very powerful um, objects to use in this game because you can give them so much information and you can give them effects as well. And just the ability alone to give them effects makes them worthwhile, but you can not only give them effects, but you can give them lighting. Because you can give them effects, you can give them animations, you can give them attacks, items, information inside of their character sheet that you can click and understand at a glance, like, oh, what is this cauldron? It does this, whatever I would have written in here. Like if I need to have all the rules set up for the cauldron, I could just put it all in here, and then, oh, I'm going to click into my cauldron and read the information regarding what it exactly does once they enter that room. But another sort of meta benefit is it gives your characters or your players something that they can look at on the battlefield and hover over and interact with. And you could be as mundane or as like whimsical as you like with these things. For example, I have these cauldrons that emit this glowing smog that gives everybody concealment when they're within the aura. Or you could do something as simple as, and I don't have this set up currently because my map that I built the map actually before I thought of this idea. But let's say we have this room here. I could have all these chairs be creatures. And then when a player hovers over it, it just says chair. Because I don't know about you, but I have players who are constantly like, I want to move this furniture around. I want to create a barricade. Okay, sure. Yeah, now I can physically drag this chair over here. And if it's not going to have more complicated effects associated with it, then you could always do a tile instead of an actual creature. But my problem with tiles is I hate, again, having to go into another tab to access them. Even going to the actors tab to get like a zone is like a burden enough for me. But if every single time a player is going to want to interact with the chair, I have to go into this tile control section and then click on the tile and move it around, just to have to click back into my token control section, it's going to just take way too much time. Especially with my players who, I know one player is going to be like, I want to move a chair. Oh, actually, can I move it over here? Oh, sure. Oh, actually, never mind. I want to move it back here. Okay, fine. Like it just takes too much time. So this here is a very, very useful tool. And essentially that's like kind of what I'm doing with a lot of these different things. I'm doing the same thing over and over again, just in 3-4 different ways. I'm adding things to a character sheet, and I'm using that character sheet in different interesting ways, not just as a character, but as an environmental hazard, as a trap, as a toolbox that has a whole bunch of effects or notes inside of it that I can quickly access without having to navigate throughout the entirety of the Foundry application. The final thing I wanted to discuss is item piles, which, again, I'm going to reiterate, I'm kind of rethinking my entire process on item piles because they don't have to be just item piles. These could easily have been changed from item piles or treasure piles in this case to item or room descriptions, room information. Because this right here could just very well have all the information for this entire room set up immediately. And so what I'm talking about is I have this sort of generic treasure pile creature setup. And let's say I have a new room down here. I can just click and drag this treasure pile over here. And I can plug treasure into this pile that I know my players are going to find in this room. So let's say I have a treasure pile here, and inside they're going to find a ruby. I go to the inventory, there's the ruby right there. And so what's nifty about this treasure pile, just based off of this functionality alone, is I have a quick and easy way to access whatever treasure is in this room. And if my players are walking into this room and they search, and sure enough, they find this treasure, I'm eliminating the need for me to go into the item directory, search for the ruby, and then add the ruby to their character sheet. Because God forbid you have an item pile like this that has all these different items. This is going to take you 1, maybe 2 minutes to add to their character. But again, 1 to 2 minutes is a pretty long time when you think about it in terms of actual pacing of a game. It's 2 minutes spent just clicking and dragging things onto a character sheet. No interaction is going on. Same thing here with this treasure pile. Like just having this all set up, pre-configured for me, a character walks in, I just click and drag the ruby on. Or if they go into this room with this big complicated treasure pile, Norbin discovers this pile of items over here, and I tell him there's 3 longbows and 6 spears. He says, I want all of them, because he's that kind of player. I say, sure. I just click and drag all those items onto his character sheet. And so what I was saying earlier about these things being not just limited to treasure piles, but you could very easily change this to like room descriptions and just have all of your room data associated with this treasure pile. You can put it all in the biography. You could link notes here. You could also maintain the inventory so you know what items are going to be found where. You could even put powers in here for like environmental effects associated with this room. You could put, I can't really see a need to put effects, but you could put effects if you found some use for them. And whenever I create these piles, I'm putting them outside of the view of the player, and I'm also keeping them hidden so that, like, God forbid they step outside of the boundaries of the map for some reason. They don't see these sort of like meta treasure piles hidden back here. But this is another great way to minimize time you're spending clicking through tabs. Everything is done in the token controls section, and you're using character tokens, which are incredibly powerful and have all of the functionality of the game associated with them, to store all this information. On my actual player characters, I have additional powers for different actions they can take, which eliminates them asking me what kind of action does run take, or how do I ready an action. It's just right there for them. I minimize the number of button clicks they're making by improving the second wind functionality here. So instead of 3 button clicks, it's 1. I give them powers to place effects that trigger in very complex ways onto their appropriate targets. And so that alone is very useful. But then moving into other types of characters, I can create a zone out of a character sheet. And that zone I can place somewhere off of the battle map and then quickly drag it into place whenever it comes into use. I can also create sort of environmental hazards or even just regular terrain that the players are interacting with. It shows them immediately that there is something there that can have some functionality associated with it, but I can also give it an effect that will then be placed onto my players as well. Like, such as these cauldrons have this aura around them that when you step into the aura, you gain concealment, right? And so you can see this Avistro now has concealment because he's in the aura of this cauldron. You can also give them animations, which also makes them much more dynamic, especially much more than a regular tile, which is otherwise very static. You can also create a Dungeon Master character sheet that, again, has information that you are going to need as a Dungeon Master just at a glance. All my biography information, powers, inventory, feats, effects, whatever it is that you think you might need, you can store it all just by hitting the C key. It's all right there. And then finally, item piles or even upgrading them to full-on room descriptions, so that if I have this shrine to Baphomet here, I could just put all the information right here, right? And so instead of going to my character sheet and saying, oh, I need to go to Well of Demons, and then clicking into Shrine of Baphomet, instead what I could do is just place this exact journal entry right here in the biography. And so the sort of combination of these things, it speeds up your game immensely. You already spend enough time in combat. You already spend enough time. You want to spend more time role-playing with your players. You want to spend more time having fun, actually enjoying the game, so maximize it. These are all things that don't necessarily have to exist in a tabletop version of the game, because in a tabletop version of the game, you don't necessarily need all these different assets and mechanical effects to keep track of all these little bonuses. But in this way, you can very easily keep track of everything without losing sight of the game itself. Like I'm lucky enough and fortunate enough to have 2 monitors, so I can have a bunch of notes off to the left of my screen, but that's just drawing my attention away from the actual game. Now I'm like looking in a browser window, or I'm looking at my notes, and I'd much rather be focused on everything that's going on here and utilizing the same functionality that my players are using. So that's basically it for this video. I just wanted to discuss those sort of 4 main ways to use character sheets to improve your gameplay. And yeah, I think that's basically it. If you have any recommendations for these videos, if you have any thoughts or ideas, please let me know. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you all in chat.